we can do it up. You
I'm
good?
good. Let's go.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
All right, Mike, great to meet you. Thanks for taking a minute out. I want to begin our conversation with surviving the last 3.5 years or so. How did you get through the pandemic, and how did it subsequently change you?
Whoa. All right. We got 30 minutes. Well, I love the word that you use, survive, because nobody knew it was coming.
Yeah.
You can't plan for you can prepare for the unexpected, plan for the worst, those kinds of things, but you certainly can't prepare for something that'll change your life up on end. And even if it didn't change yours, it changes everyone around you, and you have to respond. So one of the things I think is so cool about the pandemic, interesting to start with the positive, right? Is that it forced everyone to see that we're all in this together.
Yeah.
Humanity is kind of a one thing. But your question was, how did it throw me for a loop and how did I recover, or something along those lines? So, like everybody else, I was devastated by the loss. There was no loss of life in my immediate family, but after my first ring of friends, friends kind of come in groups of rings, if you will, like ripples in a pond. There were things starting to happen, but my wife was in healthcare, so we heard all these stories all the time. Like my dad was an insurance agent, so I was fearful of a motorcycle and all the things that could happen. So you just hear all this terrible news. Um, Most people, including me, didn't really feel the effects of the pandemic until the big news was out of the way. The lingering effects are what kind of hit. And I learned for the first time in my life that, trauma can be um, public and it can be lingering, and it's not something that goes away until you deal with it. And
Yeah.
then you still live with it, but you do have to face it. So, like others in my family, we just started having conversations about mental health. And how are you doing was a question that really took on some meaning for us because we asked it with intent and with care. Professionally, I was doing a lot of speaking and consulting. I had just launched a new service and a new speech topic in my speaking business, and all of that just went nowhere. Nobody was interested in anything. Then I started reaching out to my clients to find out what they needed and what could I do for them. Nobody could make any plans whatsoever. I've never seen so much uncertainty in the world. The uncertainty that we have right now is equal. It's about many different things. Then it was about one thing. Now it's about geopolitics, it's about economics, it's about health and safety and climate change and just a potpourri of things. So back to the positive side, the pandemic has made everyone, most everyone, more resilient. That's the only option that you have to respond, is to become more resilient, more understanding. Now, some people are still suffering and some are suffering even more, but I think most people are starting to get at that feel for, um, I'm going to have to grow so that I can face these times. Yeah.
Well
So that's
said.
that's my starter answer.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I agree. Having young kids at home, I kept saying that a level of resiliency is going to be a big deal. I remember about a week before the pandemic really started in earnest in March, I was trying to get my son, he's 19 now, but at the time he loved baseball, and I wanted to kind of divert his attention to get into something else like hockey. And he's on the spectrum, so he doesn't watch much TV. So we're watching a game, and it's a St. Louis Blues game. And one of the guys collapses like in the first quarter, like yeah, he just collapsed. And I'm like, what's going on? And they canceled the game. And I remember I came out and I told my wife, I said, they just canceled an NHL game, which little did I know, every single thing that we would divulge in entertainment wise was going to go away for a long, long time. But at that
Yeah,
point, that's
yeah.
how infantile our human brains in America were to something like that happening. And then little did we know that all of these seasons were just going to vanish like a rabbit coming out of a hat. It was just going to be gone. So it's weird how everything shifted. And I remember at that time, just with a bunch with most of the youth, like they're just used to continuity. There's things happen, everything's going. But with this thing, everything, every single facet of their lives, including ours, was totally altered. But we'd been on the planet longer than that. We had a little bit more reserve stock. But for the kids,
Well put. Yeah. Yeah.
they're just kind of trying to find a flashlight, and we have a bunker with a light in it, so it's kind of a different deal. But so I'm curious, when I look on paper and hear you explaining what you're doing, You're a strategist and a visionary, but if I was to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at career day and one of the kids said, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
Oh, I help leaders figure out what's next and then make it real.
Okay. What did you want to be in the
Now,
third grade?
when you ask me the fourth grade question, I might fail. It just gets harder and harder.
Yes. So what did you want to be when you were growing up in the third grade?
Golly, I can't remember. I kind of thought I wanted to be what my dad was, which was an insurance agent, because his dad was an insurance agent. And so was my aunt and my uncle. It was the family business. So I thought, well, I feel pretty proud about being that. But in high school, I went around and started measuring plate glass windows and looking at boilers and things like that that insurance agents do. And that was enough for me to decide that was not for me.
That's it. You're out.
My
So,
dad's not going to hear this podcast. He passed away, but so
right. Yeah, for sure. So tell me where you were born and raised, and how did these seeds of being, somebody that's helping leaders figure things out, how did all of this become and evolve into who you are today?
Sure. Well, I was born and raised in Orlando, Florida. I learned in my teens where my family came from. We have roots in Eastern Europe. And by way of a land grant program, my great grandfather, an Orthodox rabbi, who also a farmer, was brought down to Argentina to start to turn raw land into a farm. He did that. He brought family members. And the deal from Baron von Hirsch, the philanthropist that ran this program for thousands and thousands of families of all different backgrounds, was that once you have succeeded, you can sell your land. Kind of interesting. He held title until then, but they got money instead of just subsistence. So
Yeah.
they moved to the United States. And what did they do? They started another farm and eventually a store and an insurance agency and an orange grove and all those kinds of things. So I learned that they were in the business, and this is through family stories of, yeah, you have to make a living, but you have to make a life. You
Yeah.
have to work in a community, but you have to build your community at the same time. So that's the first time I really heard of those kinds of stories where I got a real inkling about what it was like to pick a direction, a lane for myself beyond just consulting and strategy and customer experience and the tools that I use. It was probably when I was working at IBM. My job there was eVisionary. And that was after I had started a digital agency, and my role was to speak, to do consulting, to find out new opportunities and things like that. But I was so surprised at how little time clients actually spent thinking.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
kind of said, I want to do blah, blah, blah. Well, it's because they read about it in a book or somebody advertised or they thought it would be cool or a friend made a bet with them. They were the most simplistic reasons for getting into business.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, and then I thought, as I was getting into the details of doing their assignments, especially around figuring out what's the new customer experience for a hotel that's never had a physical expression before, we had to design everything from scratch, the technologies, some of the operations, the cool new interfaces that you'd have for deskless check-in and things like that. I started realizing that there's a lot of work and there's a lot that goes into making it happen. The people who were buying the products and services that I was part of at IBM wanted a financial outcome. But there are hundreds of decisions that go into how that outcome is made. Are people treated fairly? Do they get a chance to learn? Do they get a chance to grow? Do customers feel valued? Do they get options? Do they get more relief, more satisfaction, a break in their schedules? These are all things that you can design for if you think about it. So going back to a lot of leaders making simplistic decisions, I don't think that's the case anymore. I think COVID has helped a lot of people to realize that what they do and how they do it matters, that the way you implement something is a model and it has an effect on others. It creates goodness for them. It creates opportunities for companies, or it can create stagnation and a lot of pain. So it was at IBM when I learned that it's important to put more good examples of how work can work into the world. And I also learned when I was there from a guy named Steve Heckel, who is one of my favorite mentors, that you can design an organization on purpose to deliver emotional outcomes, not just financial outcomes. So if you tune the work and the methods to how they make people feel, in addition to making widgets, running factories, making a profit, that there's very low incremental costs for doing that. The returns are phenomenal because people are your brand. People are the most valuable part of your operations. So that's where it all started.
It's interesting. I'm going to hone in on a couple of things from a personal standpoint that you were talking about. I remember I went to Orlando when I was 12. It was 1985. Went to Disney
Mhm.
World for the first time, and it was friends of my dad was a car salesman, and someone that he worked with was married to an insurance agent, and he got this trip for free. And that was the first thing where it was like, wow, insurance really does pay. And so we go down there, and I wish I would have taken pictures because Orlando, the landscape in '85 was just pretty barren.
It
I
was
mean,
all orange. Yeah.
yes, there wasn't much. I remember in the hotel looking down, seeing my first alligator in the water, and I was like,
Uh-huh.
"What is that?" And but it's interesting when I was in that hotel, Coke was in there, and they
Mhm.
were hatching that new Coke at the time. And it was very top
Ah.
secret. We saw signs, and they were like, just be aware, there's high level people. And I was just thinking about what you were saying. I think Coke learned a lot about humanizing a product after that because it failed miserably. New
Mhm.
Coke just it was here as long as just it was a flash and then it was gone. So I'm wondering with you saying that, where you intentionally make things because as we grew up, we're probably in the same age range. Their
I'm
commercials were very.
104.
What's that?
I'm 104. How old are
Okay,
you? No.
okay. Well, then I got some time to go. Um, but I remembered, the Mean Joe Green throwing the jersey. I want to
Mhm.
buy the
Mhm.
world of Coke. That big song, like that was the
Yeah.
beginning of real emotive advertising. So when you said that, I think that probably Coke, after they unveiled that, probably realized some flaws that needed to be fixed.
Yeah. What do you think they learned? And
I
then I'll
think
share
they
my opinion.
now, and I'm just hatching this now while we're talking. They have to realize that you can't just introduce a new flavor. You have to like embed that into the DNA of how we run, how we operate.
Yeah.
Why do you use soda? Why do you drink it? Why would you want another taste? Why would you want something that tastes like Pepsi if you're not buying Pepsi? Like, you know what I'm saying? There's all
Yeah.
of these things. It's cute to come out with the new flavor, but why are you doing it? And I'm sure all of this is a part of, especially with IBM being such a powerhouse, those guys are just the metrics they're dealing with are probably off the charts.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an opinion about New Coke. I haven't had it in a long time,
Yeah.
and I don't know for sure. So
Right.
all I can do is run on what I've read. And for this comment, I'll talk about marketing conversations I've had with other marketers who have some connection or had some connection. So all secondhand information. Um, the company broke trust with its customers, and they weren't trying to do that, but that's what happened.
Yeah.
Long story short, from what I understand, the need for profit was greater than the need to create value for customers. And that was the biggest lesson that Coke learned for all of us. A brand is nothing more than a promise, and the business's job is to keep it. And they didn't understand at the time how much customers cared about that tradition and about honoring them and communicating with them ahead of time, not forcing them. Had they introduced New Coke as a new option, like they just introduced that Coke 3000,
Yeah.
bleh,
Yeah.
to my palate.
Yeah.
But they did that as an option. So there's no faux pas, there's no break of trust. But they announced from the beginning that they were going to replace our beloved, and we didn't know how beloved it was, American institution. It belonged to us, not to the company,
Yeah.
Coca-Cola product, with something else. That taking away of choice in the US, that's like don't tread on me flag. That
Yeah.
goes really deep. And that was a good lesson for everybody. So I don't fault Coke or any of the executives for trying that. But the lesson that we can take away is that you're in business to do things for people, not to people. And that's the leader's choice.
And you got to be really careful with change. I think about Amazon and Google, how, Google's always had open space and always had the same logo. Amazon's primarily kept to their original template. I mean, I remember ordering books way back in the day, and
Mhm.
it's kind of the same vibe. It's the same setup. And I think people want that and they look for that. So that's a big deal.
Yeah, yeah, it
So,
matters.
so let me ask you this: who's been a hero for you in your life?
Gosh. Um, let me think. Um, my definition of hero is changing now. Um, It used to be, and I don't want to name names. I want to make a bigger point. So I'll try to do it without being too specific. But I used to look at people who were famous or who had achieved something really cool or done something wonderful for humanity. And I realized over time that each of them had chinks in the armor. They weren't as great as I thought they were because I was getting a very narrow slit of a view of who they are.
Yeah.
And now I'm realizing that the world has millions and millions and millions of heroes in it. And they come in all different professions, religions, zip codes. And it's the people who pay attention to what's going on around them. Their eyes are open, their minds are alert, and they're making the best choices they can within their code. So it's the people who know their code and work it that for me are the heroes. Because I think we're in a time right now, I'm getting a little philosophical, where we can't rely as much on institutions
Yeah.
to run the world for us, be they governments or NGOs or large corporations or even nonprofits. Individually and collectively at the same time, without a lot of coordination, we need to be making better decisions, voting with our feet, voting with our, I don't mean political voting, but
Right.
taking action and choosing which path to go and what to do, what to focus on, what to make a big deal of, how to, punish, not punish, but how to reprimand or teach our kids. We have to make individually and collectively better decisions. And I see more people doing that now. They're realizing that, hey, it's up to me. And that to me is what a hero does. In that moment where it's hard, they say, all right, I'm going to do the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very true. Very well said. So if you could meet anybody alive on the planet right now, and we could even open the door to ghosts, who would you love to have met and talked to?
Gosh. Um, well, right now, with all the political strife that we have, I would probably like to talk to some world leaders, living and dead, if that would be okay.
Yeah.
I'd love to see how Reagan and Brezhnev worked things out.
Yeah.
I'd like to see how others worked things out and bring some of that original vision back because we've got so much distortion from people rewriting history to their own ends and they don't understand the damage they're doing. It's just like Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
They think that the world needs what they have to offer and they're forcing their beliefs, their ways of thinking, their facts on others. And I think everybody needs to know what the facts are. Historians will say that history is nothing more than competing sets of facts.
Yeah.
But I think there's something weird going on right now at the scale that we're working
Yeah.
as a planet. Um, Lying is not good. It's not good for anybody. If you, here's a simple example. You're driving along the road and the speed limit is 60 miles an hour, and somebody decides to change the speed limit or change your dashboard so that your speedometer shows a different, setting while you're driving. That's dangerous for you and for others.
Yeah.
That's not your right just to take. And this idea of like free speech, well, hate speech isn't free.
Right.
Speech acts have to be considered. So we need to go in what I'd love to do for myself and for others is to be able to talk to the people that framed up some of these things that had their own challenges at their times in history and see if I could bring back some nuggets to share.
Yeah.
Because I think if we could talk to great leaders from the past, uh, from all different walks of life, not just the way we tell the stories, but uh, indigenous populations, people that we don't even know, obscure authors. There's so many people that know, but bringing that forward would help people see that we're fighting the same fight
Yeah.
and we need to be a little different, need to be a little better. That was
Yeah.
a little roundabout, but I hope that made
No,
sense.
I think so. I think that was very well said, and I think it's very true. I think I personally think that we've been so saturated with information and stories and things that we've convoluted everything to a point where there's conspiracies where it's like, where did the level of logic or just some modicum of IQ that can just throw out things that just don't make sense? And we can
Mhm.
question things like we can question how JFK is not on the planet anymore. Totally valid. We don't have the documentation. We have suppositions because he resisted the CIA for so long, but we also don't know a lot of things that
Mhm.
exist within the dynasty of a Kennedy family monarchy, so to speak. So anyway, that's a whole other thing. But I think we've murkied the waters so much because we have such saturation and such access to so many things. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, I know your next thing is going to be infamous interviews that you're going to
right?
talk
That's
about.
that's right. So, of all of the things that you've done professionally, what are you the proudest of?
Um, well, this is going to be less, I like to be humble, but this is less than humble. I think I've put some good patterns into the world that others can follow. That's
Yeah,
probably what I'm proudest of. When I look at specific assignments, there are some that have made a lot of money for clients. There are others that have made me look good in public. There are others where people have benefited, at the employee level and things like that. So I like to measure the value of my work by how much value it creates for my clients and for their customers. So I wish we had more measures of all of that kind of stuff. I wish the whole world did. What's the value that you really create?
yeah,
I think that would kind of move the needle away from optimization, back to what really matters. But I will give you an example. I will answer your question. A representative project that I loved was working for Transitions Optical. They were looking at moving, they're the company that makes the glasses that change color when you walk out in the sun. And
yeah,
the glasses don't just change color, they, at a molecular level, change the nature, composition of the light that gets to your eyes, which is remarkable. The
yeah,
science is fascinating and so helpful. It lets a lot of people see better
yeah.
than they could any other way.
Wow.
Okay, so that's aside. They were basically concerned about, micrometers of precision and grinding lenses and chemical formulations and production yields. But at the street level, in the in the optometrist that I went to visit and talking to the doctors and retail eyewear locations, people just didn't get who they were. And they had such an opportunity to connect with the public. So they decided they wanted to add retail to their marketing mix. So I pulled together a team and we did customer interviews, employee interviews. We did comparisons of different places. And these were just not super scientific, they were more observational and qualitative studies. But we use that to validate the idea that, yeah, there's a lot of room to fix a lot of existing problems and to address some cool new opportunities if we could have a direct conversation with the public. A store seems like a pretty cool way to do that. So we came up with an extension of the brand to include the customers and the employees' experience. We looked at what some of their constraints were and they decided, we'd love to be next to Apple stores. That just makes a lot of sense. And we talked about it, brought in some retail people, and we said, that's a pretty good strategy. Follow on strategy for a brand new, cool brand. Just be next to Apple. You can't beat that. You don't have to
Yeah,
do 5,000 pages of research. You just
yeah,
know that's the right thing to do. We programmed the store so that it would hold one or two doctors and there would be all kinds of cool things to do. And we laid out when you program a store, you figure out like the customer's here and they go here, there, there, there. What do they do? And that tells you the functionality that the store has to provide, what equipment, what seating, what furniture, what lab equipment, how do you handle cash? Is that in a safe place? What about maintenance? Do you think of all those things when you program a store? And then we started getting into the customer experience. And this was so much fun for the team and me. We came up with a path, a journey that people would go through from I'm just curious to what would I look like if I had a new pair of glasses to how do I see through transitions lenses without having to buy a pair first? That was the big thing that we solved for. So we came up with this idea for little opera glasses. And if you've ever been, to an opera, someone will hold up, this very fancy pair of spectacles with one hand. It's got a long stem, so we had something like that, and we used artificial light to let people see the difference between no transitions and with transitions. So all of a sudden, the little bunny in the mid range of light hiding in the bush would be visible. And
yeah.
here's how you would see color and so on. So it gave people a chance to feel the difference of the lenses. So that solved for the biggest problem that they had. But we also created some technology prototypes. One of them is this. Like I wear glasses most of the time when I'm working. Okay. As soon as I take my glasses off and I put on a pair of frames from the rack and I look in the mirror, I can't see what I look like
Yeah.
because these are prescription lenses.
Yeah.
So everything looks fuzzy.
Yeah.
So we built a prototype using software where you could like go like this and then put on your next pair of glasses, go like that, and do it as many times as you like. And then you put your own glasses back on and you touch the mirror. The screen was behind the mirror, and it would show several versions of your head going like this. So you
Wow.
could see what those glasses looked like.
Yeah.
And people couldn't do that before. Now you can do that at Warby Parker using your phone. But back then, more than 10 years ago, it was really kind of cool.
That
All
is
right. So
cool.
that was one of my favorites. Oh, there's one more thing I wanted to share. Um, when you have a really conservative or skeptical buyer, like the board of directors, the CEO of the organization, they'll say, okay, go ahead and try something, but they really don't expect it to work. So
Yeah.
what we discovered was magic, and I wanted to share it with everybody that's listening. We created in their space an old training facility. We took a bunch of cardboard boxes and we wrapped them in craft paper, and we put a sign on them that showed, what it would look like after it was all rendered and beautiful. And we had the CEO and the team kind of go through from station to station as if they were customers in a store of the future.
Yeah.
And that physicality of moving through the store and having conversations, and the design team reminding them of what's going on and what they're thinking and the challenges and the opportunities for the brand was it was so cool to see that moment, that day just stands out vividly in my mind because of how much transformation happened.
Yeah.
So that's what made me realize that when you, as a leader, can tell a more vivid, complete story about the future, you can reduce resistance and earn buy-in a lot faster. And that's what most of my work is about right now. So that one experience was cathartic and so helpful for me. I'm just loving projects now.
Absolutely. You wrapped up so much in that answer, and I know we're kind of running a little low on time here, so we may have to do a part two at some point, but I want to get
Of
the
course.
good business out here. If anyone wants to learn more about you, reach out, anything about your world, hire you, how do they do it?
Well, they have to learn how to spell my last name. That's the hard part. So you can Google me. It's Mike Wittenstein, Wittenstein. I'm very friendly online, especially on LinkedIn. That's a great place to reach out. And my website, about to go through, reconstruction in first quarter of 2024, is Storyminers, one word, STORYMINERS.com.
Right on. This has been great.
Thank you
Mike,
so
thank you so
much.
much. I love this. Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a great 2024.
All right, be well.
Thank you.